record. Now, first of all, I would like to appreciate that you have asked me the questions to the reply to the video which I have uploaded yesterday. This is good. And this lecture, I will be discussing with you what you have asked, what questions you have asked to me. First of all, disaster, when we try to define this term, a disaster, disaster basically, as I have been telling you in the class, that it is an event that occurs in most of the cases suddenly and it is unexpected. When that event occurs, it brings with you some sort of disturbances which cause certain distress to the people, to the objects, to the environment, and it may or result in the loss of life, damage to the property, and overall health of the population. Okay. Now, due to this event, which has occurred suddenly, unexpectedly, that it causes such a situation that the normal pattern of the life, normal conditions of the life, normal working, it gets disrupted. For example, if you remember 2019 COVID-19, and in the year 2020, all the normal life patterns, for example, going to the office, opening up businesses, there's a lot of people are doing their activities, earning. Okay, basically this that is disrupted, and this disruption also there is helplessness to the people. People are suffered. There is some socio-economic change. People are in a region or in a country. So therefore, based on this kind of a disaster, this kind of an event, that place, that country or that region or an area, it needs immediate outside intervention. Okay, what I mean to say that we need to go to the place and we need to intervene in terms of the relief and rehabilitation and the support. Okay, but I have also discussed we do disaster as per the Disaster Management Act 2005, which we have discussed in the class. A disaster means a catastrophe, it means a mishap, it means a calamity, or it means a grave occurrence that affects an area from the cause which we call as a natural cause or a man-made cause. Okay. Now, this may, for example, we talk of there is some negligence. A bus driver is driving a vehicle, is driving a bus. Due to his negligence, he has lost control over the bus and it caused an accident. And with the result, it has resulted in the substantial loss of life or human suffering or damage and destruction. Okay. Similarly, if there is enough rainfall or snowfall, that snowfall sometimes goes to the extent that is destroyed the property of the people. With the destruction of the property of the people, there may be it may also cause a loss of life or the sufferings to the people. Okay, these questions have been asked. Now, Another term I would like to discuss with you, the risk. The combination of the probability of an event and its negative consequences. Okay, you know what is risk? Risk is the combination of probability. For example, now you see, for example, if you are driving a bike, you are driving a motor vehicle, you are running and establishing an industry. But that means from the starting point of that vehicle or a bike or a bicycle, or for that matter, you are working in a factory, you are always in a risk. There is a proper probability that an event may happen and it may cause some consequences, negative consequences. Okay, that whenever we start our daily routine, we leave our home, we leave our place, and we go for a work, and there is every possibility, there is a probability that we may be hit by a vehicle on the road, that while crossing a road we are hit by a vehicle. And similarly, if you are sitting at a home, you are sitting at a place, that all of a sudden there is an earthquake, and this earthquake probability may cause a negative consequence. Okay, then another term, that is disaster risk management. Disaster. Now we have to manage this risk, this disaster risk. Basically, we will use some administrative skills, we will use certain directives, we will utilize certain organizations, we will use certain capacities to systematically reduce the risk or a disaster which has happened. There are definitely some policies which are, there are strategies, there are directives, there is administration, there are organizations, there are skills basically, which helps us to cope with the disaster risks or the hazards, and we can lower the basically we can lower or we can reduce the impacts of the disaster. Okay, the concept of this disaster risk reduction, the concept of this disaster risk reduction, it can, I will make you understand, for example, how we can do it. For example, there are bad roads, it can be taken as one of the examples, that there is a possibility, there is a probability that we are having bad roads, and because of those bad roads, when the these vehicles will ply, when they ply on the road, there is every possibility that it may cause some accident on the road. Okay, the concept and practice of reducing disaster risks through systematic efforts to analyze and manage the causal factors of disasters, including through reduced exposure to hazards, less vulnerability of people and property, wise management of land and the environment, and improved preparedness for adverse events. Similarly, you are working in a factory, you are working in an industry where it contains some hazardous materials. You have to protect yourself. You have to reduce the risk to deal with those hazardous materials. How we can do this? For example, you should have a proper uniform. You should wear a proper uniform. You should have all the gadgets on board, on the place, which in case of a hazard, that those gadgets and those machines can be used to reduce the adverse events at that place. Okay. For example, if a bus driver starts driving a bus from a place say A, and he does not check the brakes of the bus at the initial stage, at the start of the vehicle, definitely the risk to the disaster, it will increase. Once a bus leaves its place with all the measures, say brakes and fuel and all the measures are in place, definitely the disaster risk can be reduced to the maximum. There is risk management, the systematic approach and practice of managing uncertainty to minimize potential harm and loss. Now, what is a hazard? Hazard is a dangerous phenomenon. It is a substance, human activity, or condition that may cause loss of life, or it may cause injury or other health impacts. It may cause property damage, loss of livelihoods and the services, social and economic disruption, or environmental damage. Now, as far as this social and economic disruption is concerned, the best example quoted today is of COVID 2019, the pandemic, COVID pandemic. Okay, because ultimately it has also hampered the normal functioning of the people. It has affected social disruption. It has affected the economy of the countries and the areas. And it has also done the livelihoods of the people. It has impacted the livelihoods of the people. Now, what is the mitigation? That we have been asked to wear mask, we have been asked to make a distance, or there should be a social distancing, physical distancing, better to say it a physical distancing. That means mitigation. These are some of the mitigation measures. By mitigation, the lessening or limitation of the adverse impact of hazards and related disasters. Basically, by way of this mitigation, we can reduce the chances of the adverse impacts of the of any kind of a disaster. And preparedness. What is preparedness? The knowledge and capacities developed by governments, professionals, and recovery organization, communities, and individuals to effectively anticipate and respond to and recover from the impacts of likely, imminent, or current hazard events or the conditions. Okay. Prevention. The What is prevention? The outright avoidance of adverse impact of hazards and related disasters. Then I will come to the point that you have also asked for the vulnerability. When we try to define this vulnerability, it is the characteristics and the circumstances of a community, system, or asset that makes it susceptible to the damaging effect of a hazard. Okay, that you are always susceptible. You are prone, basically. For example, you are living at a place where you have got a house, and this house is surrounded from all sides. Your house is surrounded by the forests. And there is every chance that during night hours or during the day, some wild animals may visit your home. There are likely chances. Okay. That means living in a forest area makes you susceptible to what? The damaging effect of the wild animals. Okay. Similarly, if you have constructed your house near a factory, well, there are chances if there fire breaks out of the factory that it may affect your living place as well. Okay. Now we see there are different ranges, basically the range of the vulnerabilities. That it is vulnerability is the quality of being easily hurt or attacked. Okay. Like this becomes a range. We can put it into some numerals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. At what extent you are vulnerable, vulnerable to some disaster. So some disaster. Okay. Somebody has asked that can it be put in range? Yes, I put it in range. For example, if you are sitting at a very good place where we can say that you are not much susceptible to any kind of a disaster. While as a person, he is sitting on a roadside, he is crossing a road, or he is working at a place which he is handling with the hazardous materials. That means the levels of vulnerability to the people of the person who is working in a hazardous factory, that chemicals, that kind of a chemical factory which has hazardous materials, he is more vulnerable. We can say in terms of digits, say we will put that point, we will assign him 9 numbers. Whereas a person, he is living at some place where there are no chances that he may be affected by some forces, some anthropogenic forces, then we can assign it number 1. That means here definitely occurs a range of when we are saying that we are being easily hurt or being easily attacked. But when it comes to the in terms of the earthquake, for example, it may strike, and then the impact of this earthquake is very large. It cannot be confined to a particular person or a particular house. Okay, or one can anticipate that the persons who are living very near to the river Jhelum, if I take the case of Kashmir, they are more vulnerable. They are more vulnerable to the effects of the floods during the rainy season as compared to the people who are living far away from this river Jhelum and slightly on the upper side. Okay, well, this is basically vulnerability. Now I have made a vulnerability profile of a place. You can say any place. Now, if your area, you are living at a place where there is you are living near the sea, that area is vulnerable to the cyclones. Okay, if you are living near the say rivers, for example, or your area is vulnerable to the floods. Similarly, if you are living near a place where there are chances that it may catch fire, definitely your area is vulnerable to the fire. Similarly, I have written industrial or chemical vulnerability, earthquake vulnerability, tsunami vulnerability. There are drought vulnerability, urban vulnerability, and heat wave vulnerability. Okay, for example, you are in Rajasthan, you are living in Sahara Desert, you are living in Thar Desert, you are in Africa, then definitely there are chances that you are vulnerable to the heat wave. Similarly, if you during the winter months, if you keep on visiting this Gulmarg area, Pahalgam area, without using the proper shoes, it may cause, or Saichen Glacier for that matter, it may cause snow bites to your feet, and you are vulnerable. Definitely, these are different kinds of the vulnerabilities. When we talk of the vulnerability of India to the disaster, it has been seen that India is vulnerable. 57% of the land is vulnerable to the earthquakes. And out of this 57% of the land, on 12% of the land is vulnerable to the severe earthquakes. Okay. Similarly, 68% land is vulnerable in India. It is vulnerable to drought. 12% of the land is vulnerable to the floods. 8% of the land in India is vulnerable to the cyclones. They are, apart from natural disasters, some cities in India are also vulnerable to chemical and industrial disasters. And there are some man-made disasters. For example, last year in the month of December, you have seen that Delhi and Haryana and Punjab, they were burning that agriculture refuse in their fields, and they, there were a lot of problems, health problems with related to chest problems with related to the people. They were related to the people. It can be said nowadays, if you move to some metropolitan city, you can see that the air pollution, the effects of the traffic, and the these effects of the air, they are most majority of the people, they are suffering from some pulmonary disorders. Okay, these are some man-made disasters. Okay, dear. Now, these were a few of the questions which have been asked. I appreciate you. Please keep on asking me the questions, and this way I will reply to your questions. And in the meanwhile, tomorrow, inshallah, I will give another lecture. I will upload another lecture. Then on Wednesday, we are again meeting in the class, and we will discuss another topic. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much.